Most founders do not waste months because they build too little. They waste months because they build the wrong thing too early. They take a big product vision, cut it down, and call the smaller version an MVP. But a smaller product can still be bloated. It can still take too long. It can still avoid the real question the business needs answered. That is the mistake. An MVP is not a light version of the final product. It is a test designed to answer one specific business question with the least amount of waste. Before building, I want to know what assumption could kill the idea. If that assumption is wrong, the features do not matter. The branding does not matter. The dashboard does not matter. For example, if the real risk is that customers will not pay, then building the software first is probably the wrong move. If the real risk is whether the workflow solves the problem, then a polished landing page will not tell you enough. If the real risk is retention, then early signups are not proof. That is why the MVP has to be defined around risk, not around features. The goal is not to launch something tiny. The goal is to learn something true. The most common MVP mistake is taking the full product roadmap and simply removing a few features. A founder might say, the complete product will have onboarding, payments, a dashboard, integrations, automation, AI features, reporting, team accounts, and admin controls. For the MVP, we'll just build the basic version. That sounds reasonable, but it usually creates a trap. The basic version still requires login, database structure, UI, billing, error handling, onboarding, and enough polish for people to trust it. Suddenly, the MVP becomes a real product build. The problem is not that building is bad. The problem is that the founder may spend months building before proving the most important part of the business. A smaller version of the final product is not automatically an MVP. It only becomes an MVP if it tests the right assumption. If the business depends on whether customers will pay, the MVP should test willingness to pay. If the business depends on whether the solution creates a measurable outcome, the MVP should test delivery. If the business depends on whether users repeat the behavior, the MVP should test retention. The wrong MVP creates activity. The right MVP creates evidence. That distinction matters because early-stage businesses do not fail from a lack of features. They usually fail because the founder misunderstood the customer, the urgency, the buyer, the channel, or the value of the outcome. The MVP should expose that as early as possible. An MVP is the cheapest honest test of the riskiest assumption. Each part of that definition matters. Cheapest does not mean low quality. It means we are not spending unnecessary time, money, engineering, or operational complexity before the market gives us a reason to invest more. A founder should not build automation before proving the manual process is valuable. They should not build integrations before proving people want the output. They should not build a complete platform before proving the customer has a painful enough problem. Honest means the test has to measure real behavior. Compliments are not validation. Friendly encouragement is not validation. A comment saying, "Great idea," is not validation. Real validation comes from behavior that costs the customer something: money, time, data access, workflow change, internal approval, repeat usage, or a serious commitment. A person saying they like the idea is weak evidence. A person paying for a pilot is stronger evidence. A person using it every week and asking when the next version is ready is stronger than both. Riskiest assumption means the test should focus on the question that could break the business if the answer is no. That might be demand. It might be willingness to pay. It might be whether the solution actually produces the outcome. It might be whether the user will keep using it. It might be whether the buyer can be reached profitably. The The MVP is not the first product. It is the first serious attempt to reduce uncertainty. Before defining the MVP, I start with the customer pain. A product idea by itself is not enough. An AI dashboard, a CRM for a niche, a marketplace, or an automation tool is not yet a business case. Those are product categories. They do not tell us who is suffering, what is broken, or why the customer would act now. The pain needs to be specific. I want to know who the customer is, what painful moment they experience, and what that pain cost them. A weak customer definition would be small business owners. That is too broad. A better version would be home service companies doing $50,000 to $250,000 per month that still manage leads manually. Now we can picture the buyer, their workflow, and the likely problem. The painful moment also needs to be concrete. Do not say they need better automation. Say, their office manager spends 2 hours every morning copying lead details from emails into a spreadsheet, and follow-ups get missed whenever the team gets busy. That is much clearer. Then define the cost. Is the problem costing them revenue, time, customers, accuracy, compliance risk, reputation, team capacity? The cost is what gives the pain urgency. A useful structure is, for this specific customer, when this situation happens, they struggle with this problem, which costs them this specific consequence. If that sentence is vague, the MVP will probably be vague too. Once the pain is clear, the next step is identifying the riskiest assumption. This is where founders often test the wrong thing. They test the name, the design, the mock-up, or the general concept, because those are easy to show people. But easy feedback is not always useful feedback. The question is not, do people think this is interesting? The better question is, what has to be true for this business to work? For a SaaS product, the assumptions might look like this. The customer experiences the problem often enough. The pain is severe enough to justify paying. The buyer has budget and authority. The customer trusts the solution. The product can deliver the promised outcome. The user will continue using it after the first interaction. The business can acquire customers at a reasonable cost. Now rank those assumptions by 2 factors: impact and certainty. Impact means the business is in trouble if the assumption is false. Certainty means how much real evidence we already have. The MVP should target assumptions with high impact and low certainty. If you are not sure people will pay, test payment. If you are not sure the solution works, test the outcome manually. If you are not sure users understand the workflow, test the interface. If you are not sure that they will come back, test repeated behavior. This is how you avoid building features that answer low-value questions. A strong MVP is not a random first version. It is a focused test against the assumption that matters most. The MVP format should depend on the risk being tested. If the main risk is demand, a landing page with a clear offer may be enough to start, but the page needs a meaningful call to action. A waitlist can be useful, but it is weaker than a booked call, a deposit, a pre-order, or a paid pilot. If the main risk is whether the solution creates value, a manual or concierge version may be better. Instead of building software, you deliver the outcome yourself. The customer experiences the value while the backend is still human operated. This works especially well for SaaS ideas because many SaaS products begin as repeatable services. You manually perform the workflow, learn what matters, and only automate after the process has proven value. If the risk is usability, a clickable prototype can be the right test. You're not testing retention or payment yet. You are testing whether the customer understands the flow, sees the value, and can imagine using it in their actual workflow. If the risk is retention, a single feature product may be appropriate. In that case, the goal is not broad functionality. The goal is to see whether users repeat one important behavior. The format is not the point. The evidence is the point. A good MVP format produces a clear answer to a specific question. A bad MVP format gives you data that looks interesting but does not help you decide what to do next. Before launching an MVP, I want a pass/fail threshold. This is important because without a threshold, founders tend to reinterpret weak results as progress. A few people visit the page, and the founder calls it interest. Someone says they like the idea, and the founder calls it validation. A prospect asks to stay in touch, and the founder treats it like a sales signal. That is how people drift. A real MVP should create a decision, so the success criteria need to be written before the test starts. The structure is, we continue if this number of people take this specific action within this time period. For example, we continue if 5 target customers pay for a pilot within 14 days. That is much stronger than saying, we'll see if people are interested. The action matters. Weak actions include likes, compliments, casual comments, and vague interest. Stronger actions include paying, booking a serious call, sharing data, inviting a teammate, completing the workflow, using the product repeatedly, or referring another potential customer. The threshold does not have to be perfect, but it does need to be clear. If the MVP passes, we know what to build next. If it fails, we know what needs to change. The customer, the offer, the price, the channel, the workflow, or the problem itself. The point is not to prove we were right. The point is to make the next decision with better information. After defining the test, the next step is cutting scope. This is where founders usually lose discipline. They start with a focused MVP, then slowly add features because they want the product to feel more complete. They add onboarding, settings, dashboards, reports, integrations, automations, team roles, notifications, filters, admin tools, and extra edge cases. The product starts to look better, but the test gets weaker. I use 3 categories when cutting scope: must prove, can simulate, remove. Must prove includes only what is required to answer the core question. If the question is willingness to pay, we need an offer, a buyer, a price, and a way to capture commitment. We do not need a full platform. Can simulate includes anything that can be handled manually during the test. Reports can be created by hand. Data can be collected through a form. Integrations can be replaced with uploads. AI output can be reviewed manually. Notifications can be sent personally. The customer does not need to see the final infrastructure if the test is about the outcome. Remove includes anything that makes the MVP feel more complete, but does not help answer the main question. That includes features added for founder comfort rather than customer evidence. The discipline is simple. If a feature does not make the test more accurate, it probably does not belong in the first version. The first MVP should not carry the weight of the full product vision. It should only carry the weight of the first decision. There are a few MVP traps that look productive but do not create useful evidence. The first is the polished demo trap. This happens when the founder creates a great-looking prototype, gets compliments, and treats that as validation. A demo can be useful, but only if it leads to meaningful behavior. If nobody commits, pays, books a serious call, or asks to use it in a real workflow, the feedback is still shallow. The second is the bloated MVP trap. This happens when the first version includes too many features. The problem with a bloated MVP is that it becomes difficult to interpret the results. If users engage, you may not know which part mattered. If users do not engage, you may not know whether the concept was wrong or the experience was too complicated. The third is the vanity validation trap. Social media likes, comments, upvotes, and positive reactions can create momentum, but they are not the same as market proof. They may help distribution, but they should not be confused with buying intent. The fourth is the endless MVP trap. This is when the founder keeps delaying launch because the product needs one more thing, one more feature, one more integration, one more design pass, one more automation. At some point, that is no longer quality control. It is avoidance. A proper MVP has a decision attached to it. It should tell us whether to continue, change direction, or stop. If the MVP cannot produce a decision, it is not doing its job. Let's take a practical example. Say the idea is an AI dashboard for small business owners. The full product vision might be a dashboard that connects to Stripe, QuickBooks, Google Analytics, ad platforms, Shopify, and the customer's CRM. It pulls the data together, summarizes performance, and recommends actions. That sounds useful, but it is too much for the first test. So instead of starting with the product build, start with the business question. Who is the customer? Let's say it is service-based business owners doing $20,000 to $100,000 per month who do not have a finance or analytics person. What is the painful moment? They do not know what changed in the business week to week. They have revenue coming in, leads coming in, expenses going out, and multiple tools showing different numbers. They are busy, so they make decisions based on whatever feels most urgent. What is the riskiest assumption? It is probably not whether we can build a dashboard. The bigger risk is whether these owners care enough to pay for a weekly insight report that tells them what changed, what matters, and what action to take. That becomes the MVP. The first version could be a paid weekly report delivered manually. The customer connects or sends the necessary data. Behind the scenes, the founder prepares the report by hand. The customer receives a clear Monday summary with the key numbers, the problem areas, and recommended actions. Now, the test is focused. Will the target customer pay for this outcome? Will they read the report? Will they act on it? Will they ask for it again next week? A strong pass/fail threshold might be: we continue if 5 target customers agree to a paid pilot within 14 days. If that happens, now the founder has evidence. The next version can automate the most repetitive parts of the workflow. If it does not happen, the founder has learned something important before spending months building integrations and dashboards. That is the purpose of the MVP. Reduce the biggest uncertainty before making the bigger investment. The output of an MVP is not the product itself. The output is a decision. There are usually 3 possible decisions. The first is to kill the idea in its current form. If the test produces no meaningful signal, that is not a failure of the process. That is the process working. It prevented a larger waste of time and money. The second is to pivot. A pivot should not be random. It should come directly from the evidence. Maybe the customer segment was wrong. Maybe the user has the pain, but the buyer is someone else. Maybe the outcome is valuable, but the delivery model should be a service before it becomes software. Maybe the price is too high, the channel is wrong, or the problem is real, but not urgent enough. The third decision is to double down. This is when the MVP produces strong behavior. Customers pay, use the product, return to it, refer others, share data, or ask how soon they can get the next version. That is when building more starts to make sense. But even then, the next step should still be controlled. The goal is not to jump from MVP to full platform immediately. The goal is to build the next smallest version that strengthens the signal. This is how a product becomes sharper over time. Test the pain. test payment, test delivery, test usage, test retention. Then scale what the market has already proven it values. A founder should not be emotionally attached to the first version. The first version is there to teach. Before I build an MVP, I run through a simple checklist. First, is the customer specific enough? If the target customer is too broad, the test will be weak. I want a customer segment that can be identified, reached, and described clearly. Second, is the pain concrete? A vague problem creates a vague product. The pain should be tied to a real situation, a real workflow, and a real cost. Third, have we identified the riskiest assumption? This is the assumption that could break the business if it is false. The MVP should be designed around that assumption. Fourth, does the test measure real behavior? Compliments are not enough. We need behavior that shows commitment, payment, usage, time, data access, referrals, workflow change, or repeated engagement. Fifth, is there a pass/fail threshold? Before launching, we should know what result means continue, what result means change direction, and what result means stop. Sixth, has the scope been cut down to the test? Anything that does not help answer the main question should be delayed. That is how I define an MVP. Not as the smallest possible product, not as a stripped-down version of the long-term vision, not as something built just so we can say we launched. An MVP is a focused business experiment. It should identify the biggest uncertainty, create a real-world test, and force a decision. When founders define it this way, they move faster because they stop confusing building with learning. They stop adding features to avoid hard questions. They stop chasing validation that does not matter. The best MVP is not always the one that looks the most impressive. It is the one that tells the truth the fastest. That's it for this video. If you found this helpful, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep breaking down how to build real software businesses, validate ideas properly, and avoid wasting months on products nobody actually wants. In the next video, we're going to go deeper into what happens after the MVP, how to read the feedback, decide whether to pivot or keep going, and turn early validation into the next version of the product. If you have an idea you're working on, drop it in the comments and include the biggest assumption you need to prove. I may use some of those as examples in a future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.